Welcome to the Irish Pines Guided Nature Walk with Bill and Mary Riley.
There are a lot of things in place here that you can't find elsewhere in the Commonwealth because it represents some of the early investments in conservation in the state of Pennsylvania following a period of destruction and removal up through the Second World War. And then the trail system itself, the investment that he and his wife have made in identifying the unique plants. I don't know anywhere else in central Pennsylvania, perhaps even in the state, where I could go out and find an inventory of the types of vegetation that we've got and to understand their relationship to other plants. And it's a good interpretive tool that provides us background on the forest that most people don't have.
Approximately 23,000 trees were first planted at the Irish Pines between 1940 to 1946. The Rileys have operated the tree farm under a written management plan since 1971. In 1985, the Rileys initiated the Irish Pines Nature Trail. The trail was a major factor in Irish Pines being named the 1993 Pennsylvania Tree Farm of the Year. Now let's begin the Irish Pines guided tour with the Rileys, starting near the old stone house.
This is the berry of the Terian honeysuckle. It's great for the wildlife, but as I told you before, it is an invasive plant, but the wildlife love it because of this little red berry.
But this I stuck in, and see, it's a perennial, so I can count on that. A lot of the things you can't count on coming back.
Snakery.
White snakery. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty in August.
This right now, on this particular path, while it's a path to the barn, I have planted certain things for, again, the wildlife. And this is the autumn olive. And in the wintertime, it has a red berry. You can still see that little forming there of the berry. And there again, the birds and the animals like it. This barn is an original Pennsylvania, what they call a Pennsylvania bank barn. And at one time, it was completely 80 feet. And in a very serious snowstorm we had in 1977-78, it collapsed. And I was able to get, I had enough funds, not for the 80 feet, but 40 feet. So we have 40-foot barn here. And then when we have classes with adults and children, we open this up and use it as a classroom.
Oh, yeah. See, I have to take some out so you can see what's left.
But it's remarkable. All these seeds have been in the ground all those years, but given the right opportunity. When I took this out, took the privet out and the Terian honeysuckle, this popped up. This is a little experiment that I've tried to do with tree shelters. And what I have here is what they call the Purdue black walnut. Why they call it Purdue, it was developed, I think, 20 years in the making by Purdue University. And it's supposed to be a fast-growing walnut. It's impervious to disease, insects. It's the black walnut, and it's called Purdue. I got them, you can get these in little seedlings, or you can also get them in a graft, and I thought I would try the graft, and most of these are grafts. What I like is when the kids come and we have an animal down into this little area, you can see where it's depressed and a regular opening. Mm-hmm. And the one time I had a little bunny rabbit, and that certainly made the kids squeal. Here's a plant we finally got straightened out. We always thought this was hepatica, and the hepatica has a small white flower.
See the leaf down in here.
And we've misnamed this because this also has a small white flower, but this is the bloodroot. And you can see that it's rather large leaves.
And it's a different.
This is your red pine, and for the children that came, we've tried to identify it, and they also did their rubbings. As you can see, the bark is kind of rough and layered. And over here we have the white pine, which is a different species of conifer. This is what I'd say is fairly smooth. The red pine sort of layers. This was one of the original plantations planted back in the 1940s by Mr. George A. Wolfe.
There's some of this other stuff that is in the way here, but that's jewelry standing back there and all the way back.
These are a couple of cherry logs that fell during a heavy windstorm and ice storm in 1991. We've left them here for a study purposes because, as you can see, moss has developed here, and it's starting to decay, and there's a lot of salamanders and amphibians like that. There's insects that are starting to come, and you can see the crevices down below that the shrews and the voles probably use it for burrowing and for housing. And here is the starting of a fungus. It's starting. So while I did not do this. This was done by nature, and we've just left it here to show you the process of deterioration, of decay, and what it means to wildlife, and also what it means to the amphibians. Now, here's a good example of we got a fungus going here.
And up here where it's flaking off, we have some fungus.
And the birds and the woodpeckers will come in and get these insects and bugs that are in here. You see that, how the process is working? Look at that, just alive with ants.
We'll go back to the forest floor.
And first thing you know, I'll have ants all over me. Oh, here's the black cherry that we had the kids do their rubbings. And I left these on. This is I was going to say this is wild grape, but it's not grape. I think it could be poison ivy. But there again, it's a trade-off in whether you use, the birds like the poison ivy berry, and they also like the grape. But I would think that at some time down the road, this could be a wonderful, merchantable piece of timber, black cherry. So where I can, and in my own judgment, I'll cut and take out some of the poison ivy and the grape vines. Right here, we have a white pine and we have a white oak growing side by side. And this is interesting to me because in the state of Pennsylvania, the regeneration of oak is a real problem because of the deer damage.
How old would you think this forest is?
This is about 50 years old. It was planted possibly in the 1940s. This trail was really a logging trail. And here again, I did not open this up or design it. This was done by a consulting forester who helped me in this harvesting. And he suggested that we have this as our trail. We have tried to maintain it, and part of this was bulldozed back so that you don't have the deep ruts.
In early spring, we have the spring beauties out and May apples and different things that you don't see other times of year. This time of year it's pretty green except for the different kinds of ferns.
I think there are five different species of ferns, and sometimes the more I look at them, they all look alike.
It came up, had hardly any leaves, had hardly any flowers. I would have called them white, but you could hardly see them, and turned into this.
This is a black cherry stand. It's one, when this, under the management plan that we work under, this Eden Hill, the 113 acres have been developed with 13 different stands. This happens to be one of the hardwood stands. This hardwood is black. is the black cherry. And where in my judgment, I thought could be the crop tree, I've cut some of the grapevines out and the poison ivy. This is black cherry, and it died. But you can see how it was literally strangled to death by, I think that is poison ivy. But I left it there. I didn't cut it down because there again, the woodpeckers love to peck at it. As you can see, there's probably somebody's been working at it already. The foresters call this a snag. It's not a cavity tree, but it's a snag. If you look at the top, way up at the top, you can see where these little holes have been dug into by the woodpeckers. This is the mayapple, and underneath it should be an apple. But on these, I don't see any. Maybe the animals have already eaten it. This is your green briar, and there again, it's one of the little berries that the green briar has that birds will like.
And here's some more. I think they're Indian strawberries, because he had those. Baby had those.
The little red looks like a strawberry? Yeah, the Indian strawberry.
They're not sweet. Nothing.
I think they're rather bitter.
It's very good.
That's nice. Now these are some aspens. This is the quaking aspen. But this area here, while it doesn't look like it now, but we had cut with my two sons, George and Charlie, we had cut all the aspens down before the rough grouse. You see there's an opening there. That was purposely done. But if you look closer, you can see the new aspens coming up is sprouting. Aspens by themselves, if left alone, will just simply die. And then you have inferior trees coming in. But this way, since we've cut it, we do have the new aspen coming up and the rough grouse and the animals like it. We're coming into this area that we call Rachel's Forest. This was planted in April the 16th, April 16th, 1964, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, got it right. That's when Rachel was born. Rachel is my youngest daughter. And I was down here with the planters, showing them what I wanted done and how to do it and so forth. And on that particular evening, Rachel was born. So we call this Rachel's Forest. What I did was, in that one day, we planted 20,000 trees. And the far end was Scotch Pine. There was some red pine, the white pine, and then we have the spruce. What is an acre? The mathematicians will tell you it's 208 feet by 208 feet. You get a little closer, it's 43,660 square feet. Okay, what is that to a child or to anyone? So what we've tried to do is to mark, this is an acre, by these little markings that we have. And so if you're training a forester, he can visualize what an acre is. And then once you get the feel for it and citing this, you can say, oh, that's 5 acres or 3 acres. But this happens to be 1 acre. It starts here, goes back 208 feet over, and we have another marked tree down below. But this is an acre. Part of it, most of it is in white pine. When we harvested this, we took every 3rd row. And as you can see, here is where the logger took out this particular row. And that was done in 1988 and 89. And in that short time, you can see where this canopy is starting to close. So we'll be ready for another harvesting here in another couple of years. The growth here on this particular site seems to be pretty good. this time of the year, this is a very pretty ground cover. It's called Herb Robert. Hey, Mary. Yeah. Isn't this Herb Robert?
That is Herb Robert.
Good, I'm right.
A wonderful day.
If Mary says it's Herb Robert, then it's got to be Herb Robert.
Yeah, number 33 says it is too.
Over there, I've really kind of left it alone. It's Scotch Pine. And I put that next to the road because when I put that in, the trend and the thinking of Scotch Pine was that it was fast growing and I wanted something to throw up as a shield. The Scotch Pine, it's not a very good stand, and I've left it, but it's ideal for wildlife. I had a group of people in here and I was telling them about the Scotch Pine being sort of the wildlife area, and up popped 7 deer that just set the whole tone for the trip, for the day's activities. Now, this was pruned. The quality of the wood is enhanced by your pruning. There won't be as many knots. And I've taken it up to approximately 12 to 15 feet high. Now, this is actually part of the process of tree farming to get better lumber and better timber. And on this particular tree, it has been a natural pruning. But this was with a pole saw, and actually this was done some couple years ago because you can see where it's starting to grow over now. The cambium layer is starting to close. And 223 is duly recorded as to its DBH, that's the diameter at breast height, and I'd say this is approximately 8 inches. But when I used it for the DBH, I used the calipers. At the time, I didn't have a diameter tape, but I have a pair of calipers that I used. Well, now here the canopy is not as closed, and you can see the vegetation that is growing up here, where it's getting more sunlight. These aren't growing as quickly as the ones up above. And when this sunlight hits the forest floor, you can see what's developing here. There's a lot more vegetation. Here's a Shumak.
Yeah.
And the berries on that, not too many birds eat it, but in the wintertime particularly, when this plant goes into the little red fuzzy thing that everybody's familiar with Shumaks, the birds will eat that. In fact, right now there's a bee up on that little floret.
Is this a poisonous?
No, this is not the poison Shumak. This area we're in here is the drainage area, and for some reason the conifers did not survive here. When they died, these box elders came up, and I find that instead of cutting them down, I've left the box elders here because I find this seems to be a great place for the hawks. At first I thought we had a wetland, but after further discussion with people who knew wetlands, and we did some test borings, we don't. It's just a wet spot sometimes, but enough to have these box elders grow. Sinkholes seem to be something we have in the limestone country. We are in limestone country. When this started, it was just a little area, but now, as you can see, it's gotten quite large. And sometimes I like to fantasize that somewhere under here is a large cavern. I'm sure there is. And it does not have a refrigerator in it either, or tires. A few logs that have that the amphibians and your lower life would love to eat, and find something in there that's worthwhile. We have it marked both ways, Pipsissewa and spotted wintergreen.
Oh, and this time.
Oh, yeah, and that has a little white flower on it. It did have, it looks like it's now a berry.
A snail.
Yeah, that's a snail. We have a lot of snails around here. This is some of the valley and ridge that I was telling you about, and I believe in the distance, that's Brush Mountain.
The chicory.
The chicory.
Yeah, for the tower. Yeah, and this is the only specimen of it along the trail here. We do have some out on the road, or we did until the highway ran over. Wait, this is the wild parsley, the cinquefoil.
The cinquefoil.
Did you ever know they were cinquefoil?
Cinquefoil.
Boy, that is a nice, that is really nice.
Red Clover.
That really gives you a full picture of the cinquefoil, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have this marked as New England Aster, but I couldn't tell you where, is this
No,
it?
these are the Aster.
This
These
is-
plants, yeah. There's a whole bunch of them all along this
Asters,
side.
I think, is some of the most difficult plants to identify because you
Well,
have
to
a wide,
distinguish.
you have a wide variety.
That spider really has long legs. Yeah, it's a type of anemone, and they have, the flowers are pretty now, and then they have thimble type seed pods that really look pretty all winter.
There's a lot here.
And we're looking into the gap at Barry. That's the Barry water gap, and the mountain range to the left is Tussey. That goes all the way up Route 45 to Penn State College. Now that open area that you see on that mountain is the result of clear cutting. They have clear cut that, and they are now clear cutting on the other side of that mountain and letting this grow up. The deer hunters like to put their tree stands here because of the open field. As a group on the other side will flush the deer out, they come running across, and there's a tree stand up in here that they use. So, as I say, this whole area is a multi-purpose project. Timber production, wildlife enhancement, hunting, recreation, aesthetics, and I guess the seventh category would be family. We're looking for the grandkids, and we have one great-grandchild that just seems to love to get in the pickup truck with Daddy Bill. She goes crazy. Right here, here's your Ebony Spleenwort. It's a type of fern. It's one of your earlier ferns, and I was with a group of people, of foresters, and I said, "Oh, that's an Ebony Spleenwort." And he said, "What?" I said, "Ebony Spleenwort." He says, "I never heard of that." He says, "I always call this maidenhair." Oh, now here is a good example of the dogwood and why we grow dogwood for the wildlife. You see the berries that are starting to come. But that's a beautiful spread. And the birds and the bees and the animals love the dogwood. You take stuff like this. I think this is called bedstraw. It has a little prickly little flower on it, but that certainly was not planted by us. This is part of the nature, part of the growing proposition. This is your racemose dogwood. It's almost like the Terian honeysuckle. It's an invasive weed. The milkweed is a very interesting plant, and it seems to thrive with the monarch butterfly, and sometimes the monarch butterfly will lay some of its eggs under the bottom of these milkweed plants. But they say the monarch butterfly will never get eaten by a bird because of this. They like this substance. Here's a wild rose, and unfortunately, at this late in the season, the beautiful little white flower is gone, but this will now be red. It's called the rose hips. And here is the goat's beard. That's a very interesting little flower. That's yellow, and that's the result. I think it's very delicate and exquisite looking. Yellow sweet clover. Look how this has, holy, no. In fact, this has just sprung up in a couple of months.
Yeah, well, a month?
Month. This whole business, there's constant change here, constant change.
Last year's thimbleweed. See, it stays all during the summer, and then here's the new. I mean, it stays all during the winter.
Some cool day and the sun's out, the red fox will be laying up there, sunning himself, taking advantage of the heat in the winter. So as I say, we have not only raccoons, the squirrels, rabbits, red fox, the voles that you saw. We have the white-tailed deer, and most recently, they tell me there's a bear around. So besides the ruffed grouse, and once in a while, I have not seen one yet, but I have heard it, and it just excites me, is the wild turkey. I've yet to put my hands on him. And again, part of the wildlife enhancement, beside leaving areas open for the wildlife, I've tried to assist by putting up bird boxes. I know we do have the Carolina wren here, but something has chewed at that around the opening. It could have been a squirrel, but these are all little things that you do to try to help your woodlot and to enhance the bird life. Now this is common barberry, and in the wintertime there's a nice red berry on it, and the few times that I have seen wild turkey out in the brush, they have been feeding on the red berry of the common barberry. That one call was a wren, and this one over here was the cardinal. I wished I knew my bird calls more, but that's something that you have to pay attention to and get your ear attuned to. Well, we're back here to the barn again, where we started, and that's a 1-mile loop.
This guided nature walk of the Irish Pines with Bill and Mary Riley was taken in the month of June. There are many different stages of plant growth to enjoy during each season of the year. To make an appointment for group tours, call the numbers on your screen.